Welcome, everybody. I am Lori Wallach, the Director of Rethink Trade. Welcome to the briefing. Today, we are going to discuss a critical policy fix that is part of the House bill passed in February of this year, a bill designed to boost production of microchips and to start to fix our China trade mess. The America Creating Opportunities for Manufacturing, Preeminence in Technology and Economic Strength Act of 2022, which I will never say that all again, I will call it the acronym, COMPETES Act, included an innovative fix to a very big problem. It's a very big problem that ironically is called de minimis, but it ain't small. This is the technical term de minimis for a provision in U.S. customs law that allows a set amount of goods to be imported every day for each individual without having any normal customs procedures and not being subject to taxes, inspection, or tariffs. Since a 2015 amendment to a U.S. customs bill, the amount allowed for such de minimis waivers is now $800. For many years, it was $200. Starting in 2016, it shifted to $800. The idea behind de minimis, which is Section 321 of the Trade Act, is ostensibly efficiency. If a really small amount of an import is not worth really fussing with because you're not going to collect much tariffs, it's not worth all the extra paperwork. And those kind of de minimis imports are allowed what's called informal entry. That means no inspection, key information such as the tariff code, the HTS code, or a industry classification code, so you can actually track things on risk assessment, and taxes and tariffs and trade enforcement penalties like Section 301 fines on Chinese goods. None of that applies. And so now that it's $800, that is not, as it turns out, such a small deal. So, for instance, we know that things like the ban on forced labor goods, Uyghur forced labor goods, are probably circumventing the lack of inspection. We know unsafe products that the Consumer Product Safety Commission would ban are skipping inspection and getting in. We know a lot of tariff revenue and trade penalty enforcement is being skirted. And what we know from customs is that, for instance, the amount of such shipments coming in is increasing exponentially. 636 million packages in FY20, 800 million in FY 2021, and just for the first 2 months of FY 2022, 132 million de minimis packages. So we're going to be joined by subcommittee chairs Blumenauer and Schakowsky as our first speakers. Chairman Blumenauer, chair of the Trade Subcommittee, is the sponsor of an innovative fix to this big de minimis problem. It's called the Import Security and Fairness Act, and it is a fix particularly towards the flood of Chinese imports that are using de minimis to skirt trade enforcement, inspection, et cetera. In 2019, Customs said that was 1 million packages each day that were coming from China just by Air Express. These are largely packages that are ordered online. The unexpected outcome of an $800 de minimis is that we now have an enormous flood of uninspected packages, much of it coming from China, into the United States with enormous implications for health, for safety, for trade enforcement. And Congressman Blumenauer has an innovative way to try and address some of that. So it's my honor to introduce the chairman of the Trade Subcommittee, the congressman who has represented Oregon 3rd District since 1996, Congressman Earl Blumenauer. Please.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks for your work. I love the rebranding here, Rethink Trade. This is a concept that's long overdue, and I think we can start rethinking trade with what we've done with the de minimis provisions. You gave a little bit of the history. This goes back a century, back when it was literally $1 or $2. because it wasn't worth the time and energy, and you're catching tourists with a bottle of cheap perfume or a knockoff wallet or something. But it has risen steadily. And the $200 threshold going up to $800 unleashed all sorts of unintended consequences. Now, I will say unequivocally, I don't think people had a clue about what was in store when Congress took that action in 2015. It was just administrative efficiency. Well, hardly. What it did, and it is a loophole that you can drive an air cargo plane through, you can massive shipping containers. We're looking at 2 million packages a day. And we know how the Chinese operate. There's no doubt that there are products that are coming into the country without being inspected, without paying tariffs, that are the result of forced labor. There is absolutely no doubt that there are products that are the result of cannibalizing our intellectual property. There's no doubt that there are illegal substances that are coming across into the country with this glide path. It is deeply troubling to me in terms of how the Chinese have taken this loophole and exploded it. 2 million packages a day. They're marrying it up with digital sales marketing. They are, and in fact, the $800 threshold actually is kind of winked at. It's well known that if you've got a product that's $850, some enterprising Chinese company will work with you to mark down the invoice. So it's $799. So the 800, I think, is more theoretical than real. And even that is too high. Part of what we've done is to focus attention to the need to reset this. Now, what I did with our subcommittee was to deny access to de minimis treatment for a non-market economy who's included on the United States Trade Representative priority watch list. Now, coincidentally, that's just China. And I think that's a good start. But I think this is a conversation that needs to be expanded upon, looked at in greater detail. This is what I thought we could get. As you know, there's been some reluctance, but I think we can hold the line and get this moving. But I've got a fallback position that I'm willing to discuss with you and explore, because, what if we just gave other countries 5 times what they give us? China has a de minimis provision to eliminate paperwork and to be able to help their local economy. Their provision is $7, less than 1% of ours. So if we can't get this, or even if we can, an area that I'd like to explore is, well, what if we just give them 5 or 10 times what they give us in terms of reciprocity? I think this is an element that is something that ought to get broad bipartisan support. We've found that when people stand up and challenge some of the trade orthodoxy, we've had some success. Jan and I had great fun with NAFTA 2.0 and zeroing in, for example, on the pharmaceutical industry, having for the first time in our trade provisions sort of push back on that, limit big pharma. Well, I think we can do the same here. So I want to thank you for having this briefing and this conversation. We have some of my friends here that I'm eager to hear from. And I appreciate, Lori, what you're doing in terms of the work you're doing, rethinking trade. We did that with NAFTA 2.0. We're doing it with this legislation, and it's what we need to do in the future. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Not hearing you, Lori.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to working with you on this and other issues. The de minimis problem, to put in perspective of the US $800 value, there is only one country in the world that is a higher value, Uzbekistan at 1,000. And Australia sneaks in our direction by about $750. Every other country, including all the European Union countries, are generally below $200. The US used to be at 200. So as e-commerce has exploded, a lot of countries are thinking about bringing down their de minimis value because they are so worried about the issues that Chairwoman Jan Schakowsky, who chairs the committee in charge of consumer safety on the Energy and Commerce Committee, has brought up most recently in a hearing that is worth looking back on in March of 2020. Which is to say that as well as all of the trade cheating that has gone on, the de minimis system has provided a really gateway for goods purchased online to come in that are counterfeit, that are unsafe, and the lack of inspection or even the information to trigger inspection raises enormous consumer health and safety issues. So it is my honor to introduce Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who has represented Illinois' 9th Congressional District since 1999. The chairwoman has been on top of these threats and is a partner with Congressman Blumenauer in trying to figure out how to rethink trade. Congresswoman.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yes, you're right. 2 years ago, almost to the date, the Consumer Product Protection and Commerce Subcommittee held a hearing titled Buyer Beware, Fake and Unsafe Products on Online Marketplaces.
There's a Q&A.
And when we began, am I unmuted? Yeah, okay. When we began planning this hearing, I had 2 clear goals in mind. One was to strengthen the existing Consumer Product Safety Commission's relationship with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection in order to keep counterfeit and unsafe products from entering our country. And the second was to examine what tools the Federal Trade Commission needs to combat the proliferation of fake and counterfeit and stolen goods that are sold directly to consumers online. However, this hearing was kind of bad timing because it was held just before the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic, and everything really changed. Overnight, American lives shifted, and they began even more reliance on commerce, on e-commerce, to keep their lives afloat as this deadly pandemic really ravaged the world. We moved quickly to protect Americans in the 2020 omnibus. We enacted legislation that required placement of consumer product safety, putting people from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, investigators, at ports of entry, and to authorize them to the Consumer Product Safety Commission to hire more full-time inspectors in order to be able to to man those sites. So we required them to place the staff at 2 ports of entry with the most de minimis. Everybody's got that word now. De minimis shipments, that knowing what we call the Amazon loophole was positioned, was really poised to take advantage of and to exploit consumers. More of the threat to American consumers. Hold on one sec. I'm almost with you. So subsequently, in the American Rescue Act, we were able to dramatically boost the Consumer Product Safety Commission funding, which was really important, directing them to take additional action to protect Americans from dangerous counterfeit and stolen goods. And the next logical step that we have to take is Chairman Blumenauer's Import Security and Fairness Act. And I am so proud, Earl, to be a co-sponsor of your legislation. It's so important. According to the detractors, many of whom claim to be tough on China and tough on tech, they like to say that this bill is radical. But the truth is that it's absolutely common sense, and everyday Americans support it. So why did the Senate instead look to further entrench big tech power? Well, you know, this country's manufacturing and trade policy for the last 40 some years has proportionately benefited the corporate sector, and to the detriment of American workers. So the American Competes Act, which includes the Import Security and Fairness Act, Representative Blumenauer's bill, rejects this misguided, regressive action, and absolutely does what we need to do to protect consumers, to protect our economy. I think that it is absolutely the greatest idea that we could have right now to pass this legislation. So I am proud to be part of that effort, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and reporters who are on the line and everyone else who's in the Zoom. Think about questions you want to ask of the entire panel. We're about to turn to more speakers. Put questions in the Q&A section, please, of the comments and the notes, and I will call them out once we get to the Q&A portion of our webinar. So it is my honor now.
Laurie, can I just interject just for a moment? Jan is not just a co-sponsor. She's part of the inspiration for this legislation. She has just been tireless, and it's been such a delight to make mischief with her. And your next speaker has identified one of my next projects for the new Congress in terms of demonstrating the power of reshoring. I could not be more excited that you have an opportunity here for us to hear from Bob.
Actually, Bob is one person down the list because the next person. No, it's fine. The next person I'm going to introduce actually is Kim Glass, who is the CEO and the president of the National Council of Textile Organizations. a previous Commerce Department official who's actually been a negotiator on trade agreements that have to do with a variety of these trade facilitation and textile issues. Kim Glass also is a longtime Hill staffer, so a triple threat. And her actual companies, the companies she represents, are directly impacted by the de minimis provisions, which have been protections for imports that are not fair. Kim.
Thank you so much to my friend Lori Wallach. And I just want to take a moment here and really thank Chairman Blumenauer and Chairwoman Schakowsky for your incredible leadership, and my esteemed colleagues that are across the spectrum on this call today, from labor to industry groups to consumer product groups, to talk about a really timely and important issue. As Chairman Blumenauer noted, de minimis tariff exemptions were created in the 1930s. That was a time when we had virtually no international purchases were sent through the mail. And you visited your grandma in Canada, you get brought back a trinket, and you didn't have to pay a duty. This was long before the advent of mass product distribution through e-commerce. And now, nearly 100 years later, by pressing a computer button, millions of e-commerce purchases have made their way to our doorsteps from numerous countries around the world, not paying duty whatsoever. This explosion of e-commerce shipments using the Section 321 de minimis waivers has spawned new companies like Shein, a Chinese e-commerce conglomerate that built its multi-million-dollar business almost entirely exploiting the legal de minimis loophole. And many others are utilizing this as well. So CBP officials acknowledge they do not have the manpower to track or inspect even a small percentage of these countless growing shipments. They collect very little data on what's coming in. Make no mistake, these de minimis shipments are exploding, and COVID has increased this kind of shopping dramatically. Think of this real life scenario. The administration rightly has maintained Section 301 tariffs on textile and apparel products to hold China accountable for pervasive predatory trade practices. Yet, if you ship a product from China to a US consumer, or indirectly through a distribution center in Mexico or Canada to a US consumer, it pays no penalty duty. In fact, it pays no duty whatsoever. The administration and Congress has rightly and vociferously responded to the crisis of forced labor that are making the headlines across our news networks, particularly in Xinjiang, who has been widely cited for using forced labor in cotton and textile production. Yet, these products are making it to our closets with little scrutiny on where it came from and who made it, utilizing the backdoor de minimis. And that's the problem. We simply don't know where these products are coming from, who is making them, if they are made with forced labor or a result of intellectual property theft or are dangerous to American consumers. What's the point of a free trade agreement or trade penalties if you can simply find a workaround with a legal tariff trade loophole? Further exacerbating the problem is the amount of de minimis in the United States, which is $800. China, it's $7. The Chinese recognize the potential dangers to their domestic sectors if foreign manufacturers can access their consumers with zero tariffs and minimal customs requirements, but are zealously exploiting the same loophole to push all the other competitors from the US marketplace. This is especially devastating for US textile manufacturers who have endured China's exponential rise. It's impacted our Western Hemisphere trade partners and has also shuttered manufacturing operations and led to job losses. Our national de minimis policy is actually a deterrent to manufacturing consumer goods anywhere but China. And that's why we're so thankful to Chairman Blumenauer. We're thankful to Chairwoman Schakowsky. We are strongly supportive of the provision in the Competes Act that closes the loophole from China and all other non-market economies, but namely China, and helps give CBP better enforcement tools. Failure to address this loophole and will continue to be an open door policy, invites China to ship duty-free to the United States illegal and unsafe products that undermine American businesses and jobs, while also diluting any efforts to rein in these horrible human rights abuses. The time to address this is now. We are urging Congress To include this House Pass fix in the final China trade package is an important first step. It's hard to imagine any China bill without it. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you very much, Kim. And we're going to hear from another person representing business because, as Kim said, our Q&A will be joined by Brett Gibson from the AFL-CIO. And we are going to have as our final panelist before the Q&A, make sure you put your questions into Q&A, Tom Perriello, who's the Executive Director of Open Society US, who wrote an op-ed pointing out, here's a new trade approach supported by labor and business. So our next business speaker is representing Specialized Bikes, and it is Bob Marjavikas, who is a friend of Congressman Blumenauer. Congressman Blumenauer, everyone knows, is a very strong supporter of bicycling. Whenever I'm getting winded going up a hill, I think of Congressman Blumenauer's inspirational pins on his lapel of bicycles and keep pumping my way up Capitol Hill. So Bob, please, if you can talk about the dire de minimis experiences that Specialized has had.
Sure. First of all, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. And I'm going to take you on a little tour here. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're living in Shenzhen, China, and you're looking for work. You attend several Chinese seminars that are conducted by American e-commerce platforms for becoming a marketplace seller. The platform sessions share the de minimis secret, as well as offering complete assistance for establishing a Western appearance site, translations, payment collection, and just a host of other services. You find some local products, you set up an online American e-commerce store, and you are in the de minimis export business. Quickly, you realize there are no restraints. You recover all or part of your VAT that you paid. You benefit from the government subsidized express shipping. As time presses on, you become more greedy and you want to grow your business. And you realize that there are no legal consequences for shipping de minimis anything into the USA. This includes counterfeits, drugs, dangerous goods, or anything to both existing customers and potential customers. In addition, you discover from other platforms that are promoting connections that you can easily undervalue shipping documentation of high purchase value transactions to satisfy de minimis provision. You even can indicate on your selling site, will modify documentation to meet local import requirements. You realize there is no accountability for any transaction you define as de minimis. Just list, ship, and collect. You can even ship multiple products to one customer if you claim the value is less than $800. As customer issues surface, injuries occur from unsafe products, counterfeits are discovered, customers are cheated. A warning fuels closing the site. That's no issue. There are no conditions on being an online seller, so just setting up a new de minimis site with a new name can be done pretty easily and really quickly. So this is a real story, and it's a real story from a Chinese internet US marketplace seller, educated and supported by e-commerce platforms. They have learned how to navigate recovering VAT, benefiting from low-cost express carrier service, circumventing tariffs, shipping unsafe products, skirting liability, selling counterfeits, overcoming trade barriers, and providing no customer care, warranty, or service. And you may ask, how do I know so much about de minimis? I'm a guy in the bike business. Well, As Executive Vice President for Specialized, I am responsible for all matters relating to products. And I have seen firsthand Chinese companies thriving on de minimis. I have been locked into a general manager's office who was bearing an arm. He was running a counterfeit operation. His operation was producing unsafe carbon bicycle frames, forks, components, fake helmets that crumble on impact, wheels, and tires that are not in compliance with safety standards. And the interesting thing is, they were not only producing bike products, they were making sunglasses and selling toys, household goods, sporting goods, and any other product that they could ship de minimis, all enabled by de minimis, internet, marketplace sellers, and express carriers. In addition, trade provisions like Section 301 tariffs and the Xinjiang trade barriers, intent really to punish bad behavior, are further emboldened by de minimis, as Kim had mentioned. Bad marketplace sellers destroy brands while at the same time kill traditional retailers. It is these hardworking American brick and mortar retailers selling authentic products, which are tariff paid and in full compliance with all USA health and safety requirements, who are really not surviving in this commercial environment. You only need to look around to see that. They are the real American businesses that have integrity, they provide jobs, they deliver customer care, warranty services, they pay sales taxes, pay income taxes on all transactions. So, as Lori said, de minimis, which was once a sleepy way to simplify personal transactions between countries, has become a multi-billion-dollar big tech commercial loophole. The administration, Department of Commerce and the USTR, and the government leaders all talk about fair trade. But in talking about fair trade, it seems they're turning a blind eye on the millions of de minimis shipments that are being made daily. Other countries are extremely protective about de minimis. You don't really need to look further than how contentious this subject was for Canada and Mexico in the USMCA and other free trade agreements. As was already mentioned, China's de minimis is $7. Vietnam's is $40. The European community is 150 euro. The US has the second highest de minimis allowance in the world. And frankly, I'm mindful simplifying transactions is essential for trade facilitation. Other countries like the EU have developed ways on low value transaction to not only collect tariffs, but also collect VAT. They've also require registering the overseas seller, assigning an EU representative. They hold the seller accountable for the integrity of the transaction and of the product that they're selling.
Bob, if I can hop in,
yeah.
We're going to get more into the details of how how we can fix it. If I can just ask you for a last few words, and then I'm going to use Tom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last thing, and my request is that we really need to be responsible. And I'd like to see shipments lowered to 200 or less. In addition, the country of origin clearly marked, an HTS code specified, customs and commercial invoices that are accurate, content clearly and precisely identified, and formal business registration requirements for any importation. And I think that those are my requests, and I want to then thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's my honor to now introduce Tom Perriello, who I first met as a congressman from West Virginia. He is now the executive director of the Open Society Programs of the U.S. and is the author of an op-ed that basically said it all, a bipartisan trade deal in Congress that helps workers. So Open Society Foundation Executive Director Tom Perriello, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Lori. We only met when I was in Congress, but I was consuming your ideas long before that, going back to Seattle and before. It's awesome to be on with two of the most badass and brilliant Congress people we know, in Jan Schakowsky and Earl Blumenauer. And they know how to find, they know that these issues are fundamentally sexy. You don't think of de minimis as being one of those things that sets the world on fire, but it does. And I think, nothing is better than seeing public servants who are willing to stick with an issue way before it's cool, and fight for it, working with advocates like we have on this call in order to raise this alarm. Since people have covered the policy details so well, I really just want to bring the aperture back to first principles here. And I actually want to connect this to the tragedy we see in Ukraine today. The reason the world is so united against Putin is because there was a moment in 1945, after 2 world wars and a Great Depression, where people came together not out of wide-eyed idealism, but out of pretty hardened realism and said, we've got to do better. We have got to say that there are certain things that are just no longer okay. And one of those is the crime of aggression. And we've seen very clearly when Putin, in an unprovoked way, attacked another country and invaded it, that you didn't just see the West respond. You saw countries across Africa, Latin America, Asia speak out with outrage that these are the certain things that were not supposed to happen. Well, at that same period of 1945, the world made a same set of decisions about worker conditions, about basically raising the floor, about not having slave labor, and also even about antitrust and too much concentration of power in a few hands, because we had seen what that could do in World War II. Sadly, in the same way that for most of the 20th century, we didn't see the crime of aggression respected. You saw the Soviets and the United States, frankly, play the world as pawns, and we forgot about how important that was until we saw that order break down more formally. And in the same way, what was originally supposed to be an international trade system that was not about making the strongest corporations stronger, it was actually about trying to say, we want workers around the world to face better conditions. We want to create a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. And we understand that the way the global economy works, that in the absence of these basic rules, we will see an incentive for slave labor, for repressive labor, for breaking up unions, for destroying the environment, for creating a situation and countries try to outcompete by abusing their people and abusing their resources. What these Congress people and these organizations are fighting for is that same idea. We need to go back to the basic wisdom of the greatest generation that said we are going to say no longer are certain things okay. We are going to have a system of collective security, and we are going to have a system of collective economic standards and workforce standards. What we see with this de minimis rule is the epitome of saying there's absolutely no standard in the world we are going to bother because we can go through this loophole. It's the same thing as having a minimum wage and then saying, well, it's not going to apply to some of the most vulnerable workers in the economy, like tipped workers, another issue Jan Schakowsky has worked on of one fair wage. You either believe that we need to set these standards, you either believe that all human beings have the dignity to be treated in a certain way with respect, with the ability to unionize, with the ability to make a living wage, or you don't. And in a system where you don't, you are going to see the Chinas of the world and the Amazons of the world abuse that system to maximum effect, maximum repression, maximum concentration of their own corporate and repressive concentration of power. That's the choice we have here. And the stand that this group is taking, and is actually on the verge of succeeding against the odds, is to say we are going to go back not just to the vision of 1945, but an even better one, because that one was so rooted in the Western powers and the asymmetric power of that time. Well, we're now talking about one in which we could see much more unity around the world, as we have in the response to Putin, to what it means to build an economic system that actually respects workers. And we know, while we don't want to get into a new Cold War with China, the reality is they are the worst actors right now in this space. And we have way too many American corporations that are happy to collude with them to drive that distinction. So I think this is such an exciting bill because it's bipartisan. It brings together workers and business, because it's something that's very real in terms of the impacts on the working middle class. But I think this is actually part of a broader progressive movement, an inflection point on the kind of world we're trying to build and the kind of middle class we're trying to build. And just for that, couldn't appreciate more the work you all are doing and for being part of this conversation today. Thanks.
Amen, Tom Perriello. Thank you very much. We are going to open the floor for questions, and we have a couple of them have come in. It's my honor to introduce Brett Gibson, who is a legislative representative at the U.S. Federation of Unions, the AFL-CIO. He's going to join us. The AFL-CIO has come out in support of Congressman Blumenauer's bill. And I'm going to start with a first question that gets to something I'm going to give a little context to for some of the people who are YouTubers who have not gotten way deep into the weeds, but it's very apropos of what Tom just said, which is there are right now two visions of what to do on trade policy. There is this House bill, Competes, that includes Congressman Blumenauer's innovative fix and some other very progressive, interesting, pro-worker, pro-U.S. manufacturing resilience improvements that are very creative and is a forward-looking way to build on, say, that vision that Tom was speaking of, which is of a very different trade regime that never happened, called the International Trade Organization of 1948, which had labor standards and antitrust standards and all the stuff that should be global economic policy. So the vision of worker-centered, pro-health and safety trade is in the House Competes bill in many different provisions, including Congressman Blumenauer's. There is a Senate version of a bill. They both have in common a lot of money and support for having microchips built in the US. So both bills have that, and more cutting edge research. Both bills have that. But the trade provisions of the Senate bill, because this is what this question's about, has come in. The Senate bill, which is called USICA, represents a little bit more of that backwards looking trade agenda that Tom's describing that has not worked out so well for a lot of working people, and that the House bill basically breaks with and supports the President Biden's worker-centered trade agenda. So here's the question, and it's directed to the members of Congress, but I'm sure everyone who is interested can speak to it. It starts with Chairman Blumenauer. You said yesterday a virtual conference has begun for reconciling the America Competes Act, the House bill for our YouTubers, and USICA, the Senate bill. Has this issue, de minimis, come up yet as your team talks with those from the Senate Finance Committee? And if so, can you share anything about the tenor of those conversations? And then related is a question for both members of Congress, which is, if one wanted to try and fix this de minimis problem with respect to all imports, regardless of their country of origin, are there solutions to build on the innovative solution that Congress Blumenauer is proposing in this particular piece of legislation? So 2 questions, and we can start with the members of Congress, please.
Well, the virtual conference committee is something that is taking place with the top leadership in the House and the Senate. It's I have volunteered to be part of some of these conversations. I've raised it with some of my Senate friends because we have some very serious differences. You mentioned there's lots of common positive elements, but the Senate bill allows the trade adjustment assistance to expire. We reinstitute it and improve it. It doesn't have a de minimis fix, as we've been talking about. It doesn't deal with issues that relate to finished goods. Part of what we're doing is trying to restrict finished goods and more in terms of its historic concept, rather than having imported thousands of items that are already fully manufactured, finished goods. This was not the purpose of that provision, and it's another one that's been distorted. So we have a number of very specific elements that we're fighting for. We've made the point to our friends in the Senate, and we're working to try and raise the profile of these items, to have environmental protections when we're talking about GSP. These are elements that were in the House bill, and I'm hopeful that our friends and allies will continue to spotlight these so that it will be part of this informal conferencing process. I'm glad that it's taking place. I'm a little frustrated that we haven't been able to actually access the process as much as I would like.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Schakowsky, do you have anything you want to add?
The United States has made it clear that he wants a worker-first agenda, and that has to be promoted. And I would just say that the Wyden-Crapo effort to entrench big tech in USICA is something that we really need to reject. And I think that we really need to promote the way that Representative Blumenauer is taking the legislation, and I'm certainly hopeful that we could move rather in his direction.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. And not to self-promote, but for folks who want a guided tour between the two bills, please go to Rethink Trade's Medium page, where just on Friday we posted the title's a little tongue-in-cheek, China Trade Bills War, not China Trade War, but China Trade Bills War, that is a side-by-side of the House and the Senate bills that lays out precisely the differences. Just to update folks on what Congressman Schakowsky is talking about, there is a provision that was added to the Senate bill that basically gives new rights for big tech firms. It's totally unrelated to China or trade to basically attack the best anti-monopoly provisions, the best digital governance privacy provisions around the world, and would make the US government responsible for basically doing the opposite of what the Biden administation has said they want to do going forward as far as competition and oversight of big tech. So that is not only is the de minimis fix not in, but an unfortunate big tech provision is in. The next question actually is about big online retailers. And the question is, how can big online retailers like Amazon use this loophole to outcompete brick and mortar stores? Is there some inherent unfairness in this de minimis business, especially if the goods not only dodge tariffs, but even taxes? Did you mean to say no taxes are paid? Question mark. And maybe anyone from the private sector groups or anyone jump on in.
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in and then I'll let Kim jump in. This entire concept of de minimis, it does provide a tool or a way for foreign operations to import products into the United States directly to consumers. Therefore, as we indicated, it circumvents import tariffs, it circumvents any Section 301 tariffs. In addition, it circumvents sales taxes and basically any responsibility for the seller from either a warranty or customer care or safety provision. And what would really be good for the online portals to support is that the seller is either registered in the United States or there is an access of someone in the United States that is responsible for what it is that they're selling and the integrity of the product and the integrity of the entire transaction. And in addition, as we're talking about here, that there are import tariffs that are applied, particularly on higher valued import products, which traditionally de minimis actually encourages importation of high import tariff products that can be shipped into the United States without any tariff.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Okay.
Lori, I just simply say that if your retail operation is more bricks and mortar, you're impacted by this de minimis loophole. If you're Amazon or some of these online platforms, you're utilizing more e-commerce shipments and taking advantage of this de minimis tariff provision. So I think about those Main Street shops and some of the bricks and mortar retailers who've been in the United States for a really long period of time. And this is diminishing their business and those opportunities, as well as those of US manufacturers who are making these products.
Yeah, and just picking up on that, I think there's an almost libertarian argument where when people abuse provisions like this that originally had a good intention, you actually force government to regulate more. And there is a logic to the idea that there should be something for the everyday person who's got a small amount of things they're bringing back. And it's exactly the kind of provision that was meant to protect the small. And in fact, as Kimberly just noted, becomes abused by the strong so that we have to advance it in a way that often could hurt the more mainstream folks, right? But it's when the Amazons take something that's meant to be small business and abuse it, this is the direction you go. And so I think this is definitely something that's about accountability for China. I think it's also for the Amazons and the biggest corporations. And it's why, quite frankly, we need to see, in my mind, some antitrust provisions with some of these companies as well. And there should be penalties where that needs to happen, because there are a lot of businesses that are trying to do it right. And we want to help promote businesses, whether here or abroad, that are treating their workers well.
But if I could just say, also part of the Competes Act would include my Informed Consumer Act. So Amazon takes no responsibility really for the counterfeit products, maybe the dangerous products that come into the country. They say that's not our business. We're just hosting these online sellers. And the legislation I have would say, I'm sorry, that the Amazons of the world would have to vet and verify and provide basic information about the sellers that are online. So, the exploitation that we see, and then the huge profit making that we see that's going on because there are no roadblocks.
Thank you very much. And actually, the next question, I hope it's okay. I was just texting him to give him a heads up. But Brett Gibson of the AFL-CIO, I saw your hand also go up. You probably wanted to comment on the previous thing, but there's a question that's just directly up your alley, which is, can someone please explain exactly how the de minimis loophole helps imports skirt the ban on Uyghur forced labor goods?
Yeah, great, thanks. And I know that was brought up before, and I just have to say hi to Chairwoman Schakowsky and Congressman Blumenauer. Hello, it's great to be on this panel with you, and thanks for including me. So, I think we all know that in the Uyghur region, in the Xinjiang region of China, the Uyghurs, are exploited for a host of labor issues and products, whether it's solar, whether it's textiles, whether it's electronics. And any product that comes from the Xinjiang region that is produced with forced labor from the Uyghur people can be shipped in if it's under $800, whether it's electronics, whether it's, probably not commercial solar panels, but residential solar panels, a host of things. And we support workers, we support human rights. And, I think in solidarity, not just as workers, but as a human rights issue, we want to make sure that we're raising the bar for how goods come into the United States. We don't want forced labor, and the U.S. shouldn't. We have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. This definitely circumvents it because, as other speakers have noted, goods are not inspected. CBP doesn't have the resources to do so, and so it's just done. I do want to reach back to the last question and just say, in an odd way, how this affects U.S. tax base is that when you have a brick and mortar store, whether it's a small business or a medium-sized business or a large business, like just say J. Crew or Express, they have brick and mortar, they pay taxes, they support the tax base, they're in your communities. Small businesses are in your communities. We saw this with factories when offshoring was a big thing with China. Now we might see it at a more, more in the commercial space, whether it's, like I said, Express, J. Crew, Eddie Bauer, down to the small business person, and I know, or even Spokes Bicycles, which is a specialized dealer, Bob, in my, in Virginia here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brett. Our final question that we can just squeak in is for the members of Congress, but everyone who has any insights can add, which is, what do you think is the timeline for movement on the two bills? Is Memorial Day feasible for some reconciliation into a final bill and passage? And if and how could midterm elections impact that timeline?
Well, I think, just jumping in for a moment, I think Memorial Day is absolutely something that we can achieve. The issues are clearly defined. And Laura, you've been working to help people understand them very explicitly. We've identified a handful of issues where we have major disagreements with the Senate, but these are not new issues. This was part of legislation I introduced last year. They've been percolating along based on what we've done with hearings, dealing with things like forced labor and GSP and gender justice and equality in the workplace. These are, we've been working hard with our friend Dan Kildee on the trade adjustment assistance and had hearings. So this is out there. There aren't any new issues that need to be explored. And I think the differences are pretty stark. So my hope is that we all focus on these, that we make this part of the discussion that takes place over the next few weeks. There's so much that happens in the political process that's disengaged. It's disconnected from real life. These are real life provisions that affect American manufacturing, that affect American families, that affect brick and mortar businesses and product integrity and safety. So I'm absolutely convinced that if we're focused, we can get this done in relative short order.
And let me just add that I know that Speaker Pelosi really wants to move this legislation, move this agenda. And my recommendation to everyone is don't bet against Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much. So we see it here. We see a future of a worker-centered trade agenda where a bike is either made in the U.S. of U.S. parts and folks are paid a decent amount. It's sold at your locally owned small brick and mortar bike shop, which pays taxes and has people making a decent wage. Or alternatively, you have a big counterfeit flood of dangerous bikes that are sneaking in from China, maybe with forced labor, certainly unsafe. And as long as you bring them in one by one directly to the consumer and make sure it's $799 bike, not only does the brick and mortar store, if they're importing that bike, have to pay taxes and tariffs, so they're at a disadvantage, but the fake unsafe one comes in uninspected, maybe gets into your kid's hands. You can't sue anyone if, heaven forbid, an accident happens, and there is no tax base, and the workers have not been treated well in the making. Ladies and gentlemen, two visions of the future. Let us hope that the Competes Act in the House and its excellent trade provisions, including closing this de minimis loophole, is our future, not the USICA way backwards into a trade agenda that has not worked. Thank you so much to our panel. It's been an amazing discussion of all the angles. Again, it's a great honor to be on with our two congressional subcommittee chairs who have done an amazing job bringing this issue up, and with the House of Labor and Business Representatives, Tom for OSF. Thank you so much. And reporters and everyone who's attended, thank you for your time and attention. A recording of this will be available on rethinktrade.org. And again, thank you everybody for your time and your interest.